The number of single fathers like Mike raising kids on their own has gone up ninefold since the 60s. As young as 15, many live below the poverty line. But we found all too often, when they need help the most, they're denied basic services. We reached out to 50 Bay Area districts and found K-12 schools respond to reported sex assaults differently. Well, normally when a developer builds, they borrow money from a bank and the cost of construction is passed on to renters. But with affordable housing, you can't do that. So is that why housing is so overpriced, leaving Californians overwhelmed and over it? The answer is it's all those reasons and so many more.
Joining us now is our investigative reporter Candice Nguyen, who exposed the story for us earlier this year. Powerful reporting, especially to hear from the mother. This all started with a phone call. Tell me about that.
I remember it vividly. It was this time exactly 1 year ago. So I don't know if you recall, I was doing some reports on a Me Too movement at Los Gatos High School.
Sure.
A father who had been following those investigations of mine reached out to me saying that his daughter's friend had just passed away of a fentanyl-related overdose in a man's home. And then there's an actual picture of a dinosaur that your program says needs to be killed while still in the egg.
I would say that Candice, Judy doesn't have the answers to these questions.
That voice off camera? That's Vallejo's public information officer, also known as a PIO.
Where did you pull it from? Yeah.
The city PIO.
Yeah.
Clearly this is a document that has to be revised. So Candice, I'm going to have to stop the interview.
Immediately after this interview, Vallejo paused its crime-free housing program. 5 months later, the city permanently ended it. Shepherd Hall declined a second interview, but Captain Jason Potts sat down with us.
So we discontinued it, and that was in light of your interview with the housing director.
What does it mean to be a father?
Everything.
Do you want to look over those shelves?
Yeah, I'll go over here and then we'll gather everything on the table up there.
Okay, that sounds good. A research study at the University of North Carolina looked at dozens of children's stories about black families and found about half of them made no mention of a father figure.
There's no dad. And this looks like a fairly recent book.
And didn't even show a picture of a black dad. You really just don't see a presence of African American men in these stories unless the whole book is about that.
About them.
I don't see black men being seen. I see caricatures. I see stereotypes.
In contrast, a CDC study of about 4,000 American fathers found most black fathers live with their kids, and they're more likely to have bathed, dressed, and diapered their children than white or Hispanic dads. And a larger percentage of black fathers help their children with homework.
This is just such a great opportunity to meet y'all.
For months, we followed Mike and his daughter, and John and his sons. Through John, we met Leo and his little girl. 3 single black fathers, fighting stereotypes, they say, and redefining their roles as fathers.
You get people who say things like, you ain't doing anything special. You ain't doing nothing different from what women been doing since the beginning of time. And when I thought about that, I realized that actually I am doing something different. So I'm running for the two of you just in your journey as fathers. Have you encountered situations to where you have to look within yourself?
I had to kill my old self and become a new self just to be able to raise my daughter the right way. You know, if I was who I was before I had her, this would be a completely different situation right now.
When Danielle was born, I did have to have a real chat with myself about the things that I was going to allow to repeat. And, you know, there's just little things that I had to teach myself, and then also YouTube. Also, you know,
hey, DIY. Right?
Yeah, you know, DIY. You know, one of the greatest things is really understanding what you don't know, especially when you're a dad.
We need to have positive examples of black men doing positive things to let brothers know that not only is it possible, but to also encourage.
So we still have little boys growing up to be this because they ain't got their dad. Still got little girls growing up to be this because they ain't got their dad. And I'm in a prime position right now to be there for my daughter, and that is the obligation.
What is your one major goal as a father? I'll say for me, the work that I do, my sons are so much a part of that, especially as a single parent. So I'm taking them to city council meetings. And at first people are like, why are you bringing your kids here? It's like, I don't have a choice, I don't have a sitter. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then after a while,
Right, I ain't got no choice.
I don't have a choice, right?
Man, I just want my daughter to be a powerful woman. self-sufficient. You know, I want her to be everything that she wants to be.
Well, by the time Danielle's older, I'm definitely going to want to enjoy my privacy. So like, look. You know, that's if I don't have other kids. I'm a max out at 3, you know, but I got to get married first. I'm not going through this again, I can tell you that.
After being rejected from homeless shelters, Mike says he and Danny just moved into a 1-bedroom apartment.
That'll be Danielle and my first home since, you know, this whole crucible began.
For John, being denied from housing again and again because of his criminal record turned him into a housing advocate. That's Josiah looking at his father right after John helped pass an Oakland ordinance removing housing barriers for people with criminal histories. John and his sons were also able to move out of that basement they were living in and into a proper home.
You have to do 30 minutes a day.
30 minutes.
You're doing great.
Brandon's building a new life too.
And I'm thinking, like, you know, what do I tell my son are my biggest regrets? You know, like, look, dude, we were in a homeless shelter for 2 years. You know why we were there? Because of these mistakes that I made.
After 19 months of living in a homeless shelter, a rental property heard Brandon's story and agreed to take a chance on him. In the 8 months that we've been following these single fathers, we've exposed policies that keep single dads out of homeless shelters. We got the city of Vallejo to totally change one of their housing programs, letting go of a consultant and denouncing training documents we found that compare criminals to weeds. And we exposed a child care crisis that caused millions of families to fall through the cracks. And we met a lot of fathers who are still back where Brandon, Mike, and John were not long ago, struggling with homelessness and poverty while parenting.
What do you think needs to change or happen so single fathers like you feel seen?
It starts with understanding that we exist, the reality of that, and understanding how our systems work, and in most cases don't work for our benefit. And that's where it has to start. It starts with conversations like this.
You are my everything. I enjoy every single moment that we're together because she's like my little best friend at this point. Daddy loves you. You know, she looks for me. She looks to me, and I do the same for her. I look for her. I look toward her and stuff like that. So, you know, if she's not having a good day, then I'm not having a good day. So it's just like, and she's just my baby, you know?
Cool.
The question all these years, what happened to Father Alexander Castillo? Tonight, some answers, but also lingering concerns about how the case was handled by both the diocese and law enforcement. And we reveal a letter by the priest himself that has never been made public until now. January 31st, 2019.
Bold new revelations today involving the Catholic Church.
The Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland announces a high-ranking church official is accused of sexually abusing a minor.
Bishop Michael Barber sent out an internal letter to clergy members saying his secretary, Father Alexander Castillo, is on paid administrative leave.
In the nearly 4 years since the release of that internal letter, details from the diocese have been limited, and questions about how long they took to report the accusations to police remain unanswered. Here's what we knew right after the bishop's announcement. On January 30th, the diocese says they informed Castillo about the sex abuse allegations and tell him he's being placed on leave. Then early the next morning, the diocese issues a press release announcing Castillo's suspension. Police say after that press release, another 5 hours would go by before the diocese first notified them about Castillo's alleged abuse, even though clergy members are considered mandated reporters, required by law to immediately or as soon as possible report potential child abuse to police or child welfare authorities. Survivor advocates say they're outraged.
It's really suspicious, and they're not telling us where the allegation came from.
Then, less than a month later, according to the diocese, Castillo seems to vanish. The church files a missing persons report with Oakland police. Another week goes by before Oakland police tell church officials that Castillo, a native of Costa Rica, has been located somewhere outside the country. And that's where information dries up. Castillo is never indicted or charged with a crime. Bishop Barber never reveals the findings of the diocese's internal investigation. And according to the diocese, they haven't been able to reach the priest since he left the country.
No, I don't like the way they've handled it at all.
Tim Steer is a former priest from the Diocese of Oakland and one of its biggest critics. The Castillo case and the church's handling of other sex abuse scandals are on a long list of issues Steer has with the diocese and its bishop.
They've never been fully transparent about it.
When the Castillo story first broke, Steer did some investigating of his own and got his hands on this letter that he says began circulating around the diocese. It's never been published until now.
This is Castillo's email letter that he sent to a few priest friends.
Steer says Castillo's letter was sent to him by a priest we're not naming who works inside the diocese.
And he's expressing his absolute desolation.
The diocese and police never answered our questions about the letter or its authenticity, and we've never been able to contact Castillo after the initial accusation or since. But in his writing, the priest says he's innocent. Castillo starts by saying, "I died the day Bishop Barber told me somebody made an accusation against me and I was put on administrative leave."
He's in pain, a state of extreme anxiety and depression.
He calls the situation a misunderstanding and writes, "Proving my innocence requires a process I am not strong enough to undertake." He also appears to blame another priest for the allegations, saying, "Sadly, I think the mind behind this is a priest who since his time in Fremont was trying to manipulate people against me." He goes on to say the diocese is treating me as a criminal and that once you have fallen, Bishop Barber gets angry and distant. Castillo ends the email saying, "I trust that our merciful Lord will be the one showing me the compassion I couldn't find on earth."
And there's nothing about the victim. Now, he's saying that he's innocent of the charges, but he doesn't mention the victim at all. We still don't know where he is.
And that's why, 4 years later, Steer and other survivor advocates like Dan McNevin still bring up Castillo, like at their press conference at the diocese headquarters this month, where they demanded more transparency from the church.
At the moment, there are so many secrets and so much hidden that you can't really trust anything that's been said.
Since 2019, we've been trying to get our own answers from police and the diocese about what happened to Father Castillo. The diocese has not responded to our interview request or to our written questions we submitted weeks ago, but we did manage to get some details from Oakland police. Police say there were not one, but 2 potential victims, and the alleged abuse occurred between 2011 and 2014, somewhere outside of Oakland and not on church property. They say those alleged victims never cooperated with the criminal investigation, which is why the DA didn't file charges. Police also tell us they were never able to make contact with Castillo before he left the country, though they won't say when or how they tried tracking him down. When we asked police if they investigated whether the diocese may have violated mandated reporting laws, they said they never did.
Anything we learn about it, we have to either learn on our own or we get it begrudgingly when they cannot hold it back any longer.
On its website, the Diocese of Oakland has a list of priests who they say are credibly accused of abuse. Castillo isn't on it, and after our repeated requests, the diocese won't explain why. Advocates believe Castillo should be on that list, along with more than 100 other priests, some of whom are still active.
Medical aid, Howell Lane, Corralitos.
The call came in at 7:40 p.m., November 12th, in unincorporated Santa Cruz County. A possible fentanyl poisoning of a 20-year-old female in this house. Except she wasn't 20. She was 16. Lace Price was in Michael Russell's family home, reportedly barely breathing.
Medic 9 en route, 1945.
Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office's own incident report shows they treated the call as an overdose. Price couldn't be revived. At 8:47, the coroner was notified.
Some copies engine, 1766 returning, 2051.
So a little bit over an hour from the time the call is received, is essentially closed and turned over to the coroner's office.
Mike Leninger is a retired San Jose police detective who specializes in child abuse and death cases.
In my opinion, this should have been treated as a suspicious death.
3 months later, 23-year-old Russell from San Jose was criminally charged with having sex with 2 minors, including Price, and providing her with Xanax and Percocet. Russell has pleaded not guilty. Can you remember the last time you saw Lace?
I saw her in her casket. I put her makeup on her, and I did her hair. And that matters to me.
Are there any other criminal charges you would like to see?
Yeah, I would say murder, manslaughter. I mean, something to be held accountable for her not being here anymore.
Michael Russell is not facing any charges directly related to Price's death. Her parents want to know why. Prosecutors on the criminal case declined to provide details, citing active court proceedings. So the investigative unit spoke to Santa Clara County DA Jeff Rosen, who made the call to file a murder charge against a suspected drug dealer this year after he says a 12-year-old San Jose girl died from taking a pill laced with fentanyl.
It's frightening. It's tragic.
Rosen couldn't comment on the Santa Cruz case, but says prosecutors statewide are starting to file murder or manslaughter charges in fentanyl poisonings, but under specific circumstances.
We charge fentanyl when we can prove that the drug dealer knew how dangerous fentanyl was, knew that people could die from using it just by using a tiny amount or using it once, and sold it anyway to put profit over human life.
From the CDC to local counties, officials are sounding the alarm. Dealers are adding fentanyl to other drugs because it's extremely potent. It makes the drugs cheaper to produce, more addictive, and more dangerous. Rosen says charging a fentanyl dealer with the death of a user requires a thorough investigation from the start.
Otherwise, evidence that we would need disappears.
Which is the mistake Lace Price's parents say happened in their daughter's case. Russell is also charged with concealing or destroying her phone. Michael and Jill Price believe Santa Cruz County deputies failed to look at their daughter's death as a possible crime when the 911 call came in, dismissing it as just another tragic overdose.
Just the sloppiness of the scene, but there was people who came and went out of the scene.
I asked the officer, I said, if a minor was in my home today, and I called you and said they were dead on the floor, would my house be considered a crime scene? And he said, yes, it would. And I said, you failed. And he said, I know. The investigative unit tried 3 different ways to reach Santa Cruz County Sheriff Jim Hart. His spokesperson said he declined an interview. We emailed him these specific questions, but never got a response. So we stopped by his office. So we're going in now. We're going to see if Sheriff Hart comes out to answer our questions. All right, just spoke with someone with his office, and they say he's still not available to talk.
We as a law enforcement community, specifically on behalf of the District Attorney's Office, take this issue very seriously.
Johanna Schoenfield is an assistant district attorney with Santa Cruz County, supervising the narcotics unit. She can't talk about specific cases, but says her office works with law enforcement to fight fentanyl, prioritizing education.
The death to me is too late for the focus to be the emphasis. The tragedy has already occurred. I believe that the emphasis should be further upstream.
What do you mean needs to be dealt with further upstream?
Well, why are people using drugs to begin with? Why are children actively online engaging in drug-seeking behavior?
A common concern I've heard from a number of families impacted by this crisis is that they feel there's more of a blame placed on the victim and their families and not actually on the people that they believe are providing these deadly drugs. And they feel comments like that exacerbate that.
Yeah, that's a valid concern, and I don't want to minimize that we are holding drug dealers accountable.
Price's father recently visited Russell's family home that, since Lace died, was sold to new owners.
It's like just retracing like her last steps, you know.
This is where his daughter lost her life 5 months ago. He asked us to be there with him. The people living there now heard what happened and wanted him to find peace, at least here. This might be uncomfortable to watch, but Price says he wants people to see the raw pain.
what losing a child to drugs looks like, the seriousness of the fentanyl crisis.